Good morning. I'm Michael Porter, and I'm speaking to you from the Harvard Business School. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you at this annual meeting of SEBRAE in Sao Paulo, but unfortunately my duties here at the school keep me here. But I want to say how much of a pleasure it is for me to participate in this meeting of SEBRAE, Brazil's leading small business development organization. Congratulations to you for all that you've accomplished, and I want to recognize the board of SEBRAE and the staff of SEBRAE for this terrific work. Many countries have gotten interested and understand the importance of working with small companies and small businesses. We see this all around the world. The reason is that small businesses are really a vital core of any economy, and successful economic development requires small businesses to be thriving and growing. We also know that small businesses have a profound impact on the communities in which they're operating, not only in terms of hiring, but also in many other ways. So small business development is a really critical part of economic development and development in general. In engaging with small business, many business development agencies like SEBRAE in various parts of the world actually spend a lot of effort really connecting with large companies and multinationals. Why? Because they realize that if they can build those connections, this really creates the tremendous opportunities for small businesses to grow and improve and take over functions that they otherwise couldn't do so. And I think SEBRAE's Business Linkages program is an excellent example of making those connections. And SEBRAE has really developed a lot of skill in helping the small businesses improve themselves to actually meet the standards of larger companies and multinationals. So I think the question is, how can we take this work to a new level? How can we make it better? SEBRAE is doing wonderful work. The multinationals that work with SEBRAE are doing wonderful work, but how can we raise the bar? How can we take it to the next level? How could SEBRAE really approach multinationals and large companies in a different way that really adds to what you've been doing in the past? And for those multinationals here in this meeting, how could a multinational think differently about working with SEBRAE and working with small companies in the community where they operate? Now, in order to rethink these efforts, we have to step back a little and reflect on the way in which large companies and multinational companies actually engage with society and with the communities in which they operate. Most every large company has a substantial program today to try to do this. Historically, most of the ways in which large companies engage with society and with communities was really focused around philanthropy, making donations, volunteering the staff of the company to work in the community on important community and social problems. And this was good. And this is something that we see in Brazil and something that I think we all need to learn how to do better and continue to do. Philanthropy is very important. Investing in important assets for the community is really part of what every leading company should be doing. Over time, however, we realized that we needed to go beyond just thinking about giving money and volunteering, but also to a broader set of connections with the community. And in most companies, this is really called corporate social responsibility. The idea is that a company has a broader obligation to society than just giving money. Really, it needs to comply with the standards of the community, obey the law, achieve high ethical standards, and avoid harm and avoid impacts on the environment, impacts on communities that are actually not really in the community's long-term interest. And there's also a growing focus on the notion of sustainability, that larger companies have to operate in a sustainable way, and that means that they have to build assets in the communities in which they operate rather than simply utilize the community or take resources from the community. And most leading companies today have sustainability efforts that are tied to their corporate responsibility programs. But what we have identified and written about is really a very important next step that goes beyond philanthropy and goes beyond corporate social responsibility and avoiding harm. And that's what we call creating shared value. And increasingly what we're finding is that the real opportunity for major companies to influence society and connect with the community is not as a philanthropist or not by trying to do good, but actually by connecting through the business itself, by actually using the business to meet and address important societal needs in the communities in which the business operates. What this means is that major companies are finding many, many new opportunities as they think in this new way to actually engage in community activity, engage in issues like health and poverty and many others through a business model where the large company or the major company actually makes a profit in doing so. And we're seeing now hundreds and hundreds of examples popping up from around the world where the private sector is really using the business to improve health, using the business to improve education, using the business to stimulate the growth of small businesses, use the business in this very, very powerful way. Because if we can use the business to address an important societal need, then we can scale that solution. Because it's self-sustaining and it can grow with no limit. Whereas the traditional model of NGO and government focusing on social issues is limited by resources. There's just not enough money. There's not enough donations in order to do it this way in many of the most important social issues we face. Now, how does this move to shared value thinking actually affect SEBRAE and affect those of you in this room that are multinationals that are working with SEBRAE and thinking about working with SEBRAE? Well, what it does is it really reframes the whole relationship. This is not about doing good. This is not about being a good citizen. This is about the business. And the most powerful way to build the connection between large and small companies is to build a connection based on the business, based on productivity, based on efficiency, based on profitability. What we know about shared value is there's really three kinds of shared value. One has to do with the product that the company sells. So a company that sells pharmaceuticals, for example, is selling a product that meets a very important social need, which is improving health. And the question is how to get that product to customers that haven't been served before. And we're seeing lots of innovation in that area, for example. So the first level of shared value is the product. Those of you in the room that are multinationals, your product, whatever it is, potentially can have a profound impact on important societal needs. If you're a food company, it's about nutrition. If you're a machinery company, it may be about the environment, and so on. The second kind of shared value is around the value chain, the way in which the company does business in the communities in which it operates. And what we're finding is really a transformation of thinking about the value chain when you bring a shared value perspective, reducing the amount of logistics and therefore carbon, using employees in a different way to allow them to earn a better income. All of these things are things that are good for the society, but they also can be very profitable for the company. Saving energy, for example, is profitable. It's not just good for society. And then the third level of shared value is where companies understand that they can improve their performance by raising the standard of the business environment in which the companies operate. And a good example there would be in areas like supplier development. And of course, that's a sign that we now have a very strong connection here to SEBRAE and what you do. Now, as we think about organizations like SEBRAE and this connection to small business, we see that there's very powerful examples growing all over the world about how leading companies are creating huge shared value. Business value, but also social value, by new approaches here. Let me give you some examples. In terms of level 2 shared value, or the value chain, there's now a transformation in thinking among large multinationals about procurement, about how you work with suppliers. There's a growing recognition, particularly with the businesses that almost inevitably deal with small suppliers like agricultural commodity companies, that the traditional way of doing procurement, which is you just buy the product as a commodity on the market, doesn't really work. And there's a whole new model. So let's take Nestle, for example. Nestle is one of the leading food companies in the world. They work with tens of thousands, even millions of small farmers around the world who grow coffee, who grow cocoa beans and other crops. Traditionally, they've just bought those crops through the commodity markets, but now they realize that ultimately, if they're going to be productive and if they're going to be able to grow, they're going to need to raise the standard of those farmers so that they can get better quality, so they can get more reliable supply, so there'll be less interruptions in supply. And so companies like Nestle are starting to move and engage much more aggressively with their small farmer population, helping them to improve their quality, helping them to improve their yield. And in many cases, they're using intermediaries to help. Intermediaries like SEBRAE, who understand the small businesses and can raise the bar of their standards. We're seeing an explosion of this new kind of procurement as the large multinationals understand that it's not just about buying cheap coffee, it's about shared value. It's about actually creating improvement in the productivity of the suppliers. But by doing so, they often have a profound positive impact on the communities in which these farmers live and grow their crops. So this is an example of how shared value changes the dialogue. Another example is in working with channels. In many businesses, we have distribution channels. In Latin America, you're all familiar with these tiendas, these little small shops that we have in many parts of Latin America that sells some food and sells some beverages and other products in the very local community, very small little shops. There's a major Coca-Cola bottler called Arca Continental. Many of you probably know Arca. It's the second largest such bottler in the world, based in Mexico, but operating quite globally. And Arca has realized that the tiendas really have a lot to do with their success as a business. And they've adopted a whole strategy of investing and working collaboratively with those little tiendas to improve their coolers for refrigerated products to make them more energy efficient, improve their fixtures to make their little shops more attractive, and training their staff to make their staff more effective. And in the process, what they find is that the sales of their product go up by 25%. And by investing in changing the relationship and upgrading the quality of these suppliers, these small businesses through which they distribute their products, they get actually a payback of that investment in 6 months. And all of you know a 6-month payback is very unusual. That's how profitable it is to change the relationship with these tiendas and raise the standard. So those are examples of how rethinking procurement and rethinking channels involving small businesses is profoundly creating shared value. It's also, of course, tremendously benefiting those small farmers, and it's tremendously benefiting those owners of those little shops all over the country. If we look at level 3, improving the business environment, we see some other really interesting examples around the world popping up. One good example is BHP Billiton, a major mining company. There's a wonderful program in Chile where BHP Billiton is not just purchasing differently from suppliers, but is trying to create new suppliers. Because what they want to do is not have to bring in all the important inputs they need from overseas. They want to have local suppliers and local operations of suppliers so they can have more efficient procurement and avoid the costs of shipments and logistics and complexity of sourcing from overseas. And they have a program where they're trying to create 250 world-class suppliers, which are medium-sized and smaller companies in many cases, right in their area, right in their region, in the northern part of Chile. And this program has already saved BHP Billiton well over $100 million based on their calculation. This is shared value. We grow a whole new set of businesses. We raise the economic development of the entire region by stimulating the growth of these new supplier businesses. But BHP Billiton gets a profit, a business model, which is highly motivating to them to keep investing and keep trying to do this better. Another example of level 3 shared value, improving the business environment, it comes from Japan. Japan, as you know, is well known for green tea. The leading producer in the world of green tea is a company called ITO, that's based in Japan. But they've understood that unless they can find a reliable and growing supply of green tea, their business is not going to develop. And what they're experiencing is that many of the tea farmers in Japan are retiring. And much of the land in Japan that's been used to grow tea has been left to not produce. And so Ito has created a whole program, which is a great example of shared value, where they're actually teaching younger, new people how to do green tea farming, giving them technical assistance, providing them with the tools they need to improve excellent quality, making this an attractive profession for younger people to replace those retiring farmers, getting land in Japan, agricultural land that's no longer in production, back into production. This is shared value. But think of the impact they're having on these rural communities where they're doing this. It's shared value. So I think what we need to understand, those of you that are from SEBRAE, those of you that are in small companies, and those of you that are in the bigger companies, we need to understand that there's a new model here. This is not about doing good. It's not about philanthropy. It's not about being a responsible company. This is about shared value. It's about creating more productivity and more economic efficiency and more growth. But in the process, we powerfully impact not only the small businesses, but also the communities in which those small businesses exist. And as we go forward, I think the more we can think in this way about this opportunity, the more progress we'll make, the more investment everybody is willing to put in, and the more success we'll achieve. You can only depend on goodwill and philanthropy so much. You've really got to bring it into the core of the actual business and make it about the business. Not about just being good or being helpful or being a good guy in the community. Now, let me just conclude by saying that as multinationals and large companies seek to do these things, what we often see is that they don't really have all the skills and relationships that they need. And this is where an organization like SEBRAE can play a profoundly important role in really building the bridge between the multinational and the small company. But in this case, SEBRAE is really not a social organization. It's actually almost a supplier to the multinational, providing skills and technology. And we're seeing more and more NGOs or government organizations that used to think of themselves as kind of nonprofit social organizations starting to understand that they are actually business organizations. And that there's a business model for what they do, and that the multinationals are turning to these organizations to help them do this better. So again, let me congratulate all of you for the progress you've made in Brazil in this issue. Let me congratulate the SEBRAE board and staff for becoming really the leading organization in the country at this and doing such fine work. But my hope is that with some of these ideas, we can not only continue this great work, but we can make it even better. And it's been my honor to be part of this meeting, and I will look forward over the coming years to see just what all of you together can accomplish. Thank you.